This is KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Greene, and my guests today are from the History Center in Cedar Rapids. Executive Director Jason Wright. Jason, thanks for being here.
It's our honor. Thank you for having us.
And research historian, curator of the exhibit we're going to talk about. I just think of Mark Stouffer Hunter as the community's historian. So
thank you. Very glad to be here.
Mark, glad to see you as well. Whenever I want to hear a cool story about Cedar Rapids, I go to Mark because you know them all.
Well, we're all about the cool stories, and that's what we're hoping to talk about today. Is a really, really cool story.
So the upcoming exhibit, of course, you guys are still not totally moved into the new building.
Very nomadic, actually.
But that is not keeping you from doing an exhibit that actually opens tonight.
That's part of the issue, is that because we are nomadic, it's going to be 2018 before we get into the new building. We have to have a community presence, and so that's the reason that we are opening this exhibit tonight.
And it's about my cousin George George Greene.
Who doesn't know how to spell.
From the distaff version of the Greene family that doesn't know how to spell Greene.
Right.
But he, of course, is one of the legendary founding figures in the history of Cedar Rapids.
Not the founding figure, primarily Cedar Rapids, but really Linn County. I mean, he was involved in a lot of aspects of Marion, other parts of Linn County. And the name is probably most familiar to people because, oh yeah, there's that Greene Square down in downtown Cedar Rapids. And so we're really giving people some information about who is the person that Greene Square is named after in downtown Cedar Rapids. And he really is an amazing individual from our history. He really had a hand in formulating all the components that made the Cedar Rapids and Linn County greater community what it is today.
So let's start with he wasn't born here. He moved here, right?
No, he's an immigrant from he was born in Alton, Staffordshire, England, but he left England with his parents at the age of 2. And once they came to New York State, he had 2 younger brothers born, but he was an orphan at the age of 10. And so he started working for himself at that early age and eventually found his way to Iowa, starting with Davenport in 1838, the same year that we had just one log cabin down on the Cedar River where the Tree of Five Seasons is.
All right. So, and then, of course, Osgood Shepherd is the other name that everybody knows.
So this is George Greene is somebody who tangled with Osgood Shepherd.
So he's a contemporary. He was. That was the very founding. Right. Very founding.
So George Greene, Judge George Greene, as he was known most of his professional life, was right there at the very beginning of what Cedar Rapids was all about in that time. And he started to survey the county in this part of Iowa in 1838, and he taught in the old town of Ivanhoe, taught school. It's on Highway 1. It's a abandoned town site now between Mount Vernon and Solon. And then he came to Cedar Rapids by 1841, and the legend has it, we have many historical documented accounts in our collection that talk about him riding on horseback, standing on top of the hill on his horse, not standing on his horse, but on his horse, and he was looking down the hill. If you know where that Scottish Rite Temple is up there on A Avenue, that high point.
Sure. Yeah.
He's looking at this amazing viewpoint from up there and looking down and probably just seeing Osgood Shepherd cabin.
One little cabin on the banks of the river.
Maybe another cabin in the distance, and one maybe over there where Kingston was going to be. And he had the vision. Right then he had the vision. He saw the river, he saw the landscape, and said, major metropolitan city. It's going to be right here. So he had to dream. He had to dream for Cedar Rapids.
So by the end of his life, what did Cedar Rapids look like?
By the end of his life, he lived to see it grow from just those 2 or 3 people to a population of nearly 11,000 people in just the 40 years of his involvement and the last 40 years of his life, devoting all of his energies to everything that made Cedar Rapids he saw grow that much.
Now, in the early days, was it not that it was commerce and businesses associated with the river?
Yes.
Water power to power sawmills. Of course, we know the original cereal milling plant was right along the river. Was this did that come later, or did he have a part of starting those things?
He had a part in everything. So the conventions of those days, before the railroad development really hit Iowa, which really wasn't until the late 1850s, yes, he was involved in what was considered what you did to get industry and business going in a community, in a non-railroad community, which was harnessing the river, doing what you could for milling purposes with the water sources and water power that you had, and trying to help start up the businesses that would supplement those types of crude early industrial jobs. So he knew how to do all that, and he had paid attention to how it had been done in other communities. But there were limits to that, because Cedar Rapids, ironically, has a river that, except when we have these incredible floods, it's normally it's not a navigable river.
Shallow, yes,
yeah,
and
shallow.
non-navigable.
And they couldn't make it work. And Cedar Rapids, Greene was concerned with was going to fail as a community unless they got that modern form of transportation, that railroad here.
And that was the other thing he worked so hard on.
One of the main things, and we can go on and on. I mean, there's just so many things that had to happen to make Cedar Rapids what it is today in the early 21st century. And the transportation developments are always the most key signature events that turn the course of a community's path. And the railroad was that first transportation link. Although he had been involved in supporting the Higley family with the stagecoach run that ran to Dubuque from Cedar Rapids along what we now call 151. But it was that railroad, and he worked with many of the other community leaders. He had a knack for enthusiastically pulling in other individuals and family and people with capital, names that are familiar to the community, like the Beaver family, and the Higleys and the Elys and the Browns and all these families. They collectively invested their money and effort to get this railroad project going, and it was an incredible amount of follow through and tenacity on their part to get it here. And they succeeded before the Civil War. They got the railroad here before the Civil War. It's an incredible story.
Talking with Mark Stouffer Hunter and Jason Wright about the upcoming Judge George Greene exhibit, which opens tonight at the Cedar Rapids Public Library. Now, we history nerds, we could talk about this stuff all day, and I could pour over the old yellow newspapers till my head starts to hurt. But most people, honestly, aren't like that. So tell me a little bit about the exhibit and how you are bringing what George Greene did for the community to life.
Well, we're having a lot of interactive portions of the exhibit. We're going to have some activities related to, so kids can get involved. We're actually creating the public square that we now know as Greene Square. Is kind of that signature green space, no pun intended, but it was kind of like the original green space for downtown Cedar Rapids.
Because everything else was dirt.
Everything else was dirt and sand and so forth. Or it was a place where they wanted to build something on, like a house or a building and so forth. So we're trying to show the importance of what a public square is all about, a place where a community can gather and get to know each other and so forth. And so we've created an interactive where we explain why you set aside a city square block for a community gathering space, a place where we all can get together. And then we're going to encourage kids. We have a sort of an interactive for the kids to kind of, what would you do? How would you make a public square? What would you put around a public square? Would you put a house, a church, a school, these kinds of things, and kind of show them what we really did here in Cedar Rapids, and then kind of get their imaginations going on what is important, what kind of things would you want to see in a community gathering place in a public square. We're also going to try to connect with our audience starting tonight with showing how many things that we kind of take for granted about Cedar Rapids and Linn County that just wouldn't be here without Judge Greene, and try to make that relevant to their lives today. I mean, the hospital. We wouldn't have had a hospital in Cedar Rapids if it wasn't for Judge Greene. We wouldn't have Coe College. We wouldn't have the very dense collection of building development that's happened in downtown Cedar Rapids. I mean, during George Greene's lifetime, he doubled the size of our downtown by encouraging investors to come in and build up the city at that point. He was involved in elementary and high school education development in Cedar Rapids. He was involved in, quality of life issues like creating entertainment venues. I mean, he built no less than 3.
Oh, sure. The Greene Opera House.
The Greene's Opera House was kind of his crowning achievement, which started at the time of his death. But before that, he had built this earlier Union Opera House, and before that, Daniels Hall. He impressed people by putting up the first 3-story brick building that anybody had ever seen in this part of the country. I mean, it was just one of those things where he really was trying to prove that we can do what might seem impossible initially, but we can make it happen. And he set that mental idea about Cedar Rapids that if we are determined enough and we want this badly enough, we can make this happen.
He was such a forward thinker that as he was surveying what would become Cedar Rapids, and he had heard in New York that they were tearing down buildings to widen their streets to become boulevards. The reason that First Avenue, which used to be Iowa Avenue, the reason it's so wide is because George Greene said, I don't ever want that to happen in my town. So that's the reason our streets are so wide.
We'll make it wide to start with.
Exactly. It was that kind of forward thinking that was so brilliant.
Yeah, truly a man ahead of his time. Of course, we can just scratch the surface of what they're. I know we could go on and on. But the exhibit opens tonight. Explain to me, Jason, because it's going to be at the library. You guys are still out. Haven't moved home yet to the Turner House. So it'd be open, I assume, the same hours as the library. Is there a separate admission charge? How is all that going to work?
It is open during the time that the library is open. There is no admission charge.
Will you be staffing, or will it be kind of a walk-in and look?
It's walk-in and look, unless we have a special event going on. And we're also partnering with the library. And I need to put a shout-out to the library, because they have been extraordinary in welcoming us to this gallery space. We're also partnering with them so that we can make our school districts, as they pull up for the tour of the library with their buses, double bang for their buck. They'll not only get a library experience, they'll be able to come and experience our exhibit as well.
And speaking of special events, you are having the opening of the exhibit tonight,
It
right?
is tonight.
So people can come and check it out.
A little bit of snacks, a little bit of drink, and please do invite everybody that you know to come see this. It is really going to be a remarkable story we're telling about Judge George Greene. So
at the Cedar Rapids Public Library downtown, but if people want to visit the website and maybe find out a little bit more, the website is?
It is historycenter.org.
All right, Jason Wright and Mark Stouffer-Hunter. Good luck with the opening tonight, and thanks again for preserving and telling the stories about our community. It's one of my favorite things about living around here.
Oh, thanks for having us.